All right, today we have chapter 6, section 3, the daily life of the ancient Greeks. There's a statue here, and it says the statue captures a Greek athlete as he throws a discus. This event is still part of the Olympic Games and track, right? So we're going to go through the daily lives of the Athenians, specifically to Athens, right? And we're starting with children and then men. We're going to talk about women and slaves. The light of the courtyard was still gray when the young boy awoke. The boy sat up on his hard bed and felt the air on his face. He had to get up for school. The boy swallowed his breakfast, pulled his cloak around him, and left the house. Others inside were just beginning to stir. Soon the household would be starting the day's weaving and other chores. On the way to school, the boy met other students. All were carrying their wooden tablets covered with wax. They would write their lessons on the tablets. They talked about their lesson, a long passage of history that they had to memorize. Imagine having to memorize all of this for school. The best part of the day came after school. Then the boys spent the afternoon at the training ground. All the boys exercised and practiced wrestling and throwing a flat plate called discus. They might watch older athletes training to compete in the Olympic Games held in honor of Zeus. On their way to school, the boys passed through the Agora of Athens. So the Acropolis was the center of Athens' religious life, but the Agora was the center of its public life. It wasn't far from the Acropolis, which rose in splendor just above it. All Greek city states had an agora, or a public market and meeting place. Athens' agora was probably the busiest and the most interesting of them all. In the morning, many Athenian men wandered to the agora. They liked being outdoors. The mild climate of Athens made it possible to carry on business out in the open like that. In the agora, the men talked of politics and philosophy, and sometimes they just gossiped. As they talked, they heard cries from vendors or sellers of goods and the haggling over prices. Some people came eager to find bargains. The streets were lined with shops. Farmers and artisans also sold their wares from stands set up under shady trees. Just about any food an Athenian would want could be found in the agora. Everyday goods were also for sale: sheep's wool, pottery, hardware, cloth, and books. Temples and government buildings lined the agora. One building was headquarters for Athens' army, another was a prison. A board displayed public notices such as new laws and upcoming court cases. Here's a present day picture of the Agora in Athens. The large temple that you see in the center left there is the temple of the god Hephaestus. Life at home. The splendor of the public buildings in Athens contrasted with the simplicity of people's houses, even in the Golden Age. Throughout Greece, private homes were plain. They were made of mud bricks. They consisted of rooms set around an open courtyard hidden from the street, as you see in the picture there. The courtyard's kind of in the middle. So the outside, like the backyard, was in the middle of the house. The courtyard was the center of the household. Other rooms, kind of surrounding it, might include a kitchen, storerooms for storing the foods, a dining room, and bedrooms. Some homes even had bathrooms, but water had to be carried from a public fountain, although in the house we're looking at, I see a well in the middle there. Like homes, Greek food was simple. Breakfast might be a piece of bread. For midday meals, the Athenians might add cheese or olives to their bread. Dinner would be a hot meal that was more filling. It might consist of fish or vegetables, followed by cheese, fruit, and even cakes sweetened with honey. Most Athenians ate little meat. Even wealthy families only ate meat during religious festivals. So, again, we're talking about a pretty simple diet here because it's harder to grow food in Greece, right? So, we're talking cheese you can get from goat cheese from goats, um, olives, grapes, fish, of course, and then bread from wheat. and honey from bees. The importance of Athens. A quick reminder, because it doesn't explicitly say this, so I just kind of stuck this in here. Athens was the largest and most important of the Greek city states. It had many grand buildings and areas, including the Parthenon, that was that temple to Athena, right? The Acropolis, that was the high part of the city that was used as a fortress and surrounded by a wall. And then the Agora is the marketplace. The Athenians invented democracy, where every citizen could vote on important issues. All right, next we'll talk about slavery in ancient Greece. It was the job of Greek women to spin thread and weave it into cloth. If these women were wealthy, they owned slaves to help them. Slaves did a great deal of the work throughout the city states of Greece. No one knows for sure, but historians estimate that as many as 100,000 slaves may have lived in Athens. So that means it was that slaves probably made up of a third of the population. Today, we consider slavery a crime, but almost no one questioned it in ancient times, even in democratic city states like Athens. Many free people became enslaved when they were captured by armies during war or by pirates traveling on ships. And we've talked about this that it was hard to travel by ship during these times because you could easily be kidnapped by pirates and sold into slavery, even if you were free. A large number in Greece were foreigners because some Greeks, especially Athenians, were uncomfortable owning other Greeks or Athenians. Enslaved people did many kinds of work. Some provided labor on farms, which we see in one of the pictures below. Others dug silver, which we also see, and metals in the mines. Still others assisted artisans by making pottery, constructed buildings, or forging weapons and armor. Most Greek households couldn't have run the way they did without slaves. The slaves cooked the meals and served the food. They tended to the children and they wove the cloth to make clothes. You see a slave there in the picture offering jewelry to her lady. It's hard to make general statements about how enslaved people were treated. Household slaves probably had the easiest life. Most often, they were maybe treated like members of the family. The slaves who worked in the mines suffered the most. The work wasn't only physically tiring, but it was extremely dangerous. And slaves in the mines didn't live long, usually just a few years. Switching gears now to women in Athens. If you walked through the Agora in Athens, you might have been surprised to see that most of the people there were men. If you asked where the women were, an Athenian might have replied, "At home." Home was where Athenian women spent their days. They had almost none of the freedoms that their husbands, sons, and fathers took for granted. They couldn't take part in politics, nor could they vote. They couldn't own property. About the only official activity allowed to them was to be a priestess in a religious group. Running the home and family was the job of the Athenian woman. In some wealthy families, men and women had completely separate quarters, like separate sides of the house. Women organized the spinning and weaving. They looked after the supplies of food and wine, and they cared for young children. They also kept track of the family's finances. If a family was wealthy enough to have slaves, they were the woman's responsibility. She directed them, trained them, and she took care of them when they were sick. Women throughout Greece did important work. No Greek man would have denied that. Yet, women were expected to be invisible. As Pericles said, the greatest glory will belong to the woman who is least talked about by men, whether they praise her or find fault with her. There's a picture here from a Grecian urn, and it says, making clothing for the family was the job of the Greek wife and her enslaved servants. The women wove woolen cloth on large standing looms like the one pictured on the base from the 500s BCE. Very simple notes today. You're telling me about what an agora is and identifying the city of Athens. And that's it.